Hey guys, today we have a guest, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to do an interview. It's not something we do a lot on our channel, but we are in Moscow at the moment, and we have an American here, and we actually met in, I think, 2011 maybe? Yeah, in Ukraine.
Yes.
And you were teaching English there.
Yes.
And you've been in this part of the world since then, pretty much, yeah, more or less.
Oh, kind of, yeah.
Back and forth a
Yeah.
bit. So you spent a lot of time in Ukraine and Russia.
Yes.
I want to talk about your experience in this part of the world and also what you do, which has been mostly like nannying or being a governess. Yeah. So, and teaching English too,
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I feel like, especially like this, these jobs, being like a nanny, au pair, or even English teacher, governess, is something that people don't necessarily realize is something that is happening all over the world, and that it's kind of a big industry. So I thought it'd be cool to ask you a few questions about that, and we'll see where it goes from there. So how long have you actually been in Ukraine and Russia?
I was in Ukraine for 3.5 years, and for Russia, I've been 4.5 years.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Long time.
Yeah. And it's how much has it been like back and forth? Like how?
I really, I took a break of about 2.5 years, and I took another break of 6 months, so.
So wow.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's not like you go back like every few months, basically, yeah?
No, I mean, I'll go back for a holiday or to renew my visa or not even for special occasions. Like it's too expensive to go back and forth for even like a baptism or a birthday. I'm from a big family, so I can't go back for everyone's birthday. But
you're telling me.
Yeah, if I have vacation time and I need somewhere to go and there's a family occasion, then maybe I'll make a trip home. But it's quite a sacrifice to go because it's a lot of time. There's jet lag and lots of money. So
yeah, for sure.
There's got to be something worth it for me to go
understand
home.
that. We definitely understand that. Yeah. So, how did you, before you went to Ukraine, had you traveled much internationally?
The only international travel I had done was to Canada and Germany. I went to Germany with my grandma when I was 12.
Okay.
So she's from Germany, so we went to go see her family, and we were there for a month. So that was a really incredible experience, and that's kind of where I grew up traveling around the U.S., so I already love traveling, but my international travel bug really... it bit as soon as I went with my grandma to Germany, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
So
nice. So, but relatively speaking, not that much international travel.
No.
But so then how did you decide to go to Ukraine?
So my grandfather was from Ukraine, and he moved to America after World War II. My grandmother's from Germany. She moved after World War II, and they both ended up in Nebraska. And a mutual friend introduced them, and so my grandparents were from these two countries, and they raised my mom and my uncles with the cultures and traditions of both countries. And so it was a part of our life growing up. And he passed away in 2007, and all of those cultures and traditions started to fade away. And I'm a very nostalgic person, and so those things really meant a lot to me, and I didn't want to lose them. And so I decided, I'm gonna go to Ukraine. I'll learn how to make the food and how to have that in my own life. When I have a family in the future, I can continue those traditions.
Get back to some of the roots.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we, I was like, okay, I'll go after college, but I just kept getting this feeling, no, you need to go now, you need to go now. And so I found a program that allowed me to go as a volunteer English teacher. And that's where, before I had been a nanny in America and worked with children anyway, but this is where I got my taste for teaching English and found out that I'm actually really good at it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, no, let's kind of like combine these two things. And I had an opportunity to stay when I was in Ukraine for the first semester, and I was too scared to do it because without the safety net of the organization I had gone with, I was really scared to be there by myself. I'm like, I don't know anyone. And then I went home, and then I had an opportunity to go back again. And the same program, right? Yeah, same program, but as a supervisor.
The program is ILP, right?
ILP.
So I'll just mention what international language programs, you can Google it. I did it too.
Yeah.
And in 2007, I went to Voronezh, Russia. Mm-hmm. And so we're two examples of how, be careful if you go on one of these programs, because, I have a Russian wife and I speak Russian, and I've spent several years in this part of the world too. So it's a cool opportunity. So like the first, like when you first go, you're a teacher, you pay a certain amount, and it's a non-profit, so you can actually fundraise it too and get tax breaks. But you go, and it's nice, like you say, because you have the organization that organizes your housing, your food, and the transportation.
Yep, just a built-in support system for you.
Yeah, and then any like legal issues or whatever. So that is really nice. And then the second time you go back, it's free. Like they even give you a bit of a stipend, right?
You get a small stipend. Yeah. It's not anything to.
But you don't have to pay out of pocket.
Exactly, you don't have to pay out of pocket, but you have a little tiny bit of play money.
Yeah.
You can buy an extra ice cream or something.
Do you remember how you found like the site or the program?
I actually had friends who had done it before. Yeah. So my first friend that did it she came to Russia. She came to Moscow. And then another friend went to Mexico. And then when the friend came back from Russia, I heard that they opened in Ukraine. And it kind of stuck in my head. I'm like, oh, Ukraine, that's where my grandfather's from. Maybe someday. And then when I had that strong feeling, you need to go now, I looked into the program, and they just happened to have a spot open, which actually at least in my experience over several years while I was working with them, they never had openings immediately. It was like you're on a waiting list to go like in a year or a year and a half, even 2 years from now. But they happened to have an opening for the next fall, and it was April. So it was just like the next semester basically. And so I was like, okay, I gotta, and I did fundraising. That's how I did mine. So
cool. It's the people that give you the money. You give them a receipt, and they get a tax break. So that's exactly nice. Yeah.
And in
the U.S., it doesn't work in Canada, but still, it's cool.
Wherever you are, they have different rules. So talk to your tax advisor.
Yes. No, that's super cool. Okay, so. I just asked how you found it, because I just got like an email, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I was just about to graduate high school, and then I was like, I saw it a bit earlier, maybe a few months earlier. I was like, that's nice for those people that go there. And then I saw it like a month before I graduated, and I was like, wait a sec, I'm about to be free. I could do that. And so I was like, I'm going to go. So I did. And
yeah. Changes your life.
So, and then you kind of like stayed.
Yeah, so the second time I said, if I get an opportunity to stay, I will. But I have family in Ukraine. My grandfather's brothers and all of his descendants are still in the villages in the mountains in Ukraine. So,
you know them?
I went and met them actually that first semester. I went and found them. My family had lost contact several years before. So I just showed up. I wrote a letter, but they didn't respond. And I had it translated to Ukrainian. And we had this free weekend, and so a couple of us girls went, and one of my friends who spoke Russian, Ukrainian, English, like lots of languages, and so we went out and we took the train and we took the marshrutка for 2 hours, and it's up in the mountains. It was the end of February, and it was snowing, in the mountains, and it was dark by the time we got there. And so the driver just drops us off in the middle of nowhere. There's like no lights, and it's snowing. We're like, well, where do we go now? There's no signs, there's no nothing. Middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden we just see this one guy walking down the street, and we're like, hi, do you know this family? And he's like, yeah, they're our neighbors. So, and he's like, just go on in. We're like, knock, knock, knock. But it was a really interesting experience, because they didn't realize who we were. So at first they were very standoffish. They wouldn't talk to us. They're all very like closed off and not welcoming. And then finally my friend was able to translate. She's like, what's your grandfather's name? So I told them, and then they're like, oh, our American cousin. And then they brought out like a feast, and literally the next 4 days was nothing but overeating, walking and sleep. Yeah, we stayed for the weekend.
Wow.
So it was like tons of food, and then we would go for a walk, and we'd take a nap, and then more food. Yeah. And it was crazy. So,
yeah, they love to feed you.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Gosh. Yeah. I think I gained at least 10 pounds.
Easily.
Easily.
Amazing. So, that was a really cool story.
Back to staying. So so the second time I wanted to stay and spend time with my family, because I wanted to learn family recipes and all of those things. So I did, and I went and visited my family and stayed with them for a bit. I got our family recipes. I know how to make my grandfather's borscht. I know how to make all the foods that we grew up eating. And then
So the program ended and you kind of stayed. Yeah, like, I remember you were like you would like go to Poland and come back.
Yeah,
and stuff.
I would go and do visa runs and just go to neighboring countries, mostly to Poland.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was definitely an adventure, super adventure. But yeah, I just told myself, you know, if I find another position, I'll stay, and if not, I'll go home.
Yeah.
Whatever happens will happen.
Yeah.
Ended up staying in Ukraine for 3.5 years.
Yeah. So when did you get started with like being a nanny or a governess?
Actually that didn't start really until, I was a nanny in America, so I had experience with that, and I had experience working with lots of children, plus I'm the oldest of 5 children, so I already had experience with children. And then the governess / nanny teaching English, that started when I came to Russia. So after the conflict with Ukraine, the economy crashed.
The beginning, I guess.
The beginning of the conflict.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't say after yet.
Well, yes, right after it began,
the
economy crashed a little bit, and I decided I'm going to go home. And an agent.
Because it became not very practical.
Money-wise,
you can't really make money there anymore.
I wasn't there for the money. I was there for the experience, and then the little money that I was making went away, and I was like, I can't even pay my rent. So I love it, but I think it's time to move on.
Mm-hmm. So you started in paid English teaching.
Yeah, I was doing. I worked at a private kindergarten, and I did private tutoring on the side. So. And yeah, the money became an issue. And so I decided I was going to go home. And right then an agent from Moscow messaged me, and he's like, do you want to come to Russia? And I was like, not really.
You don't hear good things about Russia.
Especially when you've been in Ukraine.
Yeah, during
the conflict. Yeah. And so I was like, no, not really. And he was like, well, there's a family here. They want you to teach English to their kids. You'd be a nanny and an English teacher. And I was like, well, I've been a nanny before, and I've been an English teacher, and I love doing both. So I'm not opposed to it, but I need to go somewhere where I can make money. And so he was like, well, actually, they pay really well, and they pay for your apartment, and then you go spend your summers in Italy. I was like,
wait, what?
I'll talk to them. Yeah. Let's talk on Skype, and we'll see.
Okay.
So I did a Skype interview, and they were great, and they said, we want to meet you in person. So they paid for my visa, for my flight from Ukraine. I went and stayed with them for 4 days, and I said on one condition that I could stay the whole weekend so I can see Red Square, just in case I never come back, Okay. Free trip to Russia.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was great. I got along with them very well, and at the end of the 4 days, they handed me my salary for the 4 days, which I wasn't expecting. And it was more in 4 days than I had made in an entire month in Ukraine.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was like, I'm hooked. So,
this isn't so bad.
Yeah. So it was really nice.
Yeah. Okay. I want to get deeper into that. Maybe before we get deeper into this governess nanny thing, you've been here for so long. Is there anything other than the money or like your relatives that you can put your finger on? Like, why do you stay? What keeps you here? What do you?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Are there other things that just grabbed onto you? And
I think both of those are very strong reasons why that I came and that I stayed, and that it was. I've also been able to easily find a community here, so I have a lot of friends who are Russian. I have a lot of friends who are expats from other countries, and they've kind of become my family. So for me, it's like wherever I am in the world, the expat community kind of like brings you in and you become family. So that's really cool. I love that.
Yeah. So you got friends here now.
Yeah. Now I have a network that is very supportive. Mm-hmm. So that helps.
How do you find them?
Lots of different ways. Facebook, couch surfing, friends who know somebody who's an expat here. A lot of times I'm talking to somebody, they find out I'm from America, and they say, oh, I know somebody from Ireland, and they don't know anybody here. And I'm like, give me their number. We'll meet up, we'll have coffee, or we'll go dancing or something, just because we all know what it's like to be new in a country and to not have any friends. And so we become family for each other.
Cool. So Facebook like group, like
yeah.
Facebook groups?
So there's now there's expat groups.
Yeah.
Well, in the beginning I didn't have that, so it was just kind of word of mouth.
Yeah.
Who knows who? You bump into people on the street. Like I've met people on the street and they're speaking English, and I'm like, oh, you speak English? Where are you from? And you just instantly maybe not instantly become friends, but you have a common bond, and you kind of become friends already because you have a common language, or you're from the same country, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. What brought you here? You know? So you have at least a piece of your story that matches.
Yeah, you can relate. Definitely, in at least some ways, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is there anything that you don't like here, or that annoys you? I don't know.
Ooh, it depends on the day.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some people can be very stubborn or off-putting. You know, I guess it can be like that anywhere in the world. So you just have to kind of have compassion. Be like, you don't know what they're going through today. Maybe their dog died or something. But a lot of people walk around looking like their dog just died. So you're like, I'm gonna walk this way a little bit more.
Okay.
But also, I drive here, and so the driving can get a little bit crazy sometimes. The taxi drivers drive me crazy.
Yeah.
And then just sometimes there's it's not so much a Russian thing. It's like foreigners in Russia that maybe aren't expats from the English-speaking countries. You know, they don't speak English, but they can be really forward and blunt about questions, whereas in America or in Western countries, nobody would ever ask you questions like that. Okay. And you're like, what? Why would you ask me that? Like, none of your business.
Yeah.
What? Uh-huh. So it's just... I think now nothing really surprises me, but for the first 6 years, there was at least something, at least once a week, if not every day, that I'm like, I'm not in America anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's get a little bit deeper into being a governess or a nanny. So, okay, maybe people haven't heard of the word governess or governor, or maybe they've heard it, they don't know what it means. So what's the difference between a governess and a nanny? Or a governor and a manny. Sometimes they say.
Let me see if I can describe it accurately. I don't really know the technical definitions of them, but as a nanny, it's more like, for example, in America, it's like a glorified babysitter. You're helping to raise the children. You're helping with hygiene. You're helping with some developmental things. Governessing is usually there's language aspects, there's etiquette, there's manners, there's how to act appropriately in social situations, how to be emotionally intelligent. You know, everywhere in the world we struggle to teach kids emotional intelligence, and so that's something that I feel as a governess that I've been able to focus on more. You're able to go deeper into psychological things with children. I don't have a psychology degree, but you're able to work on deeper things that help them to be more productive adults.
Okay.
Members of society.
I kind of have this understanding that usually, for example, if you get a governor job here, for example, the kids will also have nannies?
Yes.
So
not always, but often, yeah.
Yeah. So you're not taking care of hygiene and cooking and stuff like that?
As a governess, no. There's usually a cook or a nanny who takes care of the food. There's a cleaner who takes care of the cleaning, or the nanny will do that. And a lot of times hygiene. So if it's a baby, they'll take care of changing diapers, feeding, things like that. Mm-hmm. But you're still there. You'll eat meals with them, or you'll be there during bath time and communicate with them, and teach them, if they're doing something that's impolite or incorrect, you find ways to teach them that so that it's more natural for them.
Cool. So how could somebody get into this if that sounds cool?
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into more of the details about how this might be cool or might not be cool, but how do you get into it?
Sometimes it's who you know. Other times you can go through agencies. If you are going through agencies and not word of mouth, it's best to have qualifications.
Okay. So I was going to ask you about that too.
Yeah,
So what could those be?
You could have an early childhood education degree. You could have a child psychology degree. You could have just a basic education degree, a teaching degree, teaching English as a foreign language degree. There are actually...
That's probably the easiest one to get.
Yeah,
if you just get like a certificate.
Yeah, if you just get a certificate, that one's pretty easy to get. Definitely having experience in some way, whether it's being a nanny, being a teacher, being a tutor, some sort of experience that you can show. A lot of times they do want degrees, but if you can present yourself on paper well enough, then they kind of overlook the degree and they're like, oh, well, but she has lots of experience and lots of results. So
have you noticed like what they seem to pay the most attention to when you're applying for a job? Or
they pay a lot of attention to accent.
Okay.
So they want more of a clear neutral accent or a specific region. So some families only want a British accent, or some only want an American accent. And so they can be pretty picky in those ways. But they usually have a reason for it. Like they want the child to go to a British boarding school, or they want the child to go to a school or university in America, or they're planning to move to one of those countries, or they spend their summers there or something like that. So there's usually a pretty good reason for it. But they can be pretty picky about their accents.
Yeah. Okay. Have you seen any crazy listings? Like sometimes when I get like emails sometimes, and they have very kind of crazy requirements. Like I've seen one that's like they want you to speak English and French at a level that you could teach, and they want you to also be able to drive, swim, and be at like a black belt level in some kind of martial arts.
Also musical talent. They want you to like. I've seen several where they want you to be proficient in a musical language, I guess, like, or a musical instrument. So piano or violin or something like that. So you can teach the children that as well. Or if, especially here, if you are very good at gymnastics or figure skating, they look at that and they get really excited too, because a lot of the girls especially, or even the guys in gymnastics and figure skating or hockey, or football players, like soccer players, if they have a lot of experience with that and they're good at that sport, then they can teach the children and help them to practice. So they are able to teach the language through doing something that they love anyway and that they're already trying to become good at. Okay. So then they're doing it in multiple languages. Yeah,
sometimes it gets pretty wild, I feel like, what they're looking for.
Yeah. I have seen some crazy things. My craziest experiences are actually finding out after a trial that there were actually extra criteria that they didn't post because it would not have attracted anybody. Okay. So after the fact, they'll say, well, you didn't get this job because they want the nanny to weigh less than this amount of weight. And I'm like, wow. Yeah. Or what's another one? I don't know. There have been a couple where the mom was jealous of like the relationship that I had already established with the child. So she was like, no, because she's gonna like her better than she likes me. And I'm like, wow. Oh, I mean, it's a good thing, but it's also, I mean, I understand why you wouldn't want that, but it's also a good thing because then it makes teaching a lot easier. Yeah. Because they're like, oh, I want to be with her, and I'm like, good, let's learn English.
Wow. Yeah. So these people. Oh, one question I had is, how about Russian? Did the parents want you to know Russian?
Most of the time, no. They prefer that I don't know Russian.
Because they don't want you to speak Russian to the kids.
Exactly. Well, if a child knows that you speak Russian, in general, they won't speak English ever again. Because why would you? If you can just speak your native tongue and it's easier, then why would you speak another language?
So that's interesting, because I feel like some people would think, I'd like to do that. Yeah. It sounds intimidating to go to Russia and work there.
I don't know the language and I'll never learn it.
On the other hand, like it may actually be a benefit in some ways if you don't know Russian, because
It's really good. It helps tons actually to not know the language. So.
Cool. That's very interesting. So these people, are high wealth families, right? Like, who are these people?
Yeah, they're.
What do you know? Like, what they do? Like,
I do, but
examples?
I can't really talk about it.
Yeah.
A couple. I've worked for actresses. I've worked for movie producers. I've moved bank CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
People who own lots of restaurants. What else? I worked for one family that he was a self-made billionaire who owned a oil company.
Oh.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's they're just kind of, from all different walks of life, but the thing they have in common is they have high wealth and they like to travel in style.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
I do too.
Yeah, sure. So,
who doesn't?
Would you say the market for like governesses, nannies, like, are there too many here, or are there not enough? Like, what is it? What's it like right now?
I think it kind of ebbs and flows. So
Okay.
sometimes the market is really saturated, and sometimes it's not. But the saturation isn't always with qualified people.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the thing. So then the qualified people are fighting for jobs with the unqualified people, because the unqualified people are like, well, if I can just go and make tons of money, why not? But
I guess there'd be a lot of turnover then if
there is,
people are not good.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about just like some of the conditions. Like, what kind of salaries are offered now, and what kind of like benefits and stuff? Because this is something I think you might be surprised by some of the conditions that I mean, you guys might be surprised.
We're not surprised by anything anymore.
I see the listing sometimes. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Well, actually, one time I was offered through an agent, which is always interesting because the agents are getting a big cut too. I know,
they are.
but I was offered once to go with two like teenage boys to Altai, to the mountains, mountain range in Russia, and like ride like snowmobiles with them every day and like do English lessons with them. I think they wanted like once a day. And just like hang out with them for $200 a day, and everything would be paid.
Yep.
And I was like, I could do that, you know. So what kind of things do you see? It doesn't have to be like exactly what you've made, but like what are the listings like right now?
On average, I would say, a lot of the listings are in Great British pounds, and so a lot of them would be around £1,000 a week, which is quite a bit of money.
Well, considering
considering
your other benefits, which are
a lot of times they'll pay for housing, they pay for transportation, they'll pay for, and this isn't with all families, but the more prominent families, they'll take care of So they also will take care of visa costs for you.
Food, of course,
food,
right?
Food when you're working with them, sometimes even when you're not. And travel when you're with them, they cover all expenses. And then usually it's 28 days paid vacation. So that's pretty sweet, because in America it's 10 days maybe?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Sure, paid vacation. And so what do you find when you're working like full-time as a nanny or a governess? What expenses do you have out of pocket? Do you have like any?
It depends on if you live with the family or not.
Yeah.
If you live with the family, you basically have no expenses because everything's covered. Your food's covered, your rent's covered, everything. If the family pays for your housing and you're not live-in, then you'll have expenses, whatever food you want to buy, whatever entertainment you want to do, whatever transportation outside of work, anything like that. But I mean, you can be frugal if you want. I was able to pay off all my student loans with the money I made in one summer here. So that was really, really nice. But I was frugal, and I was living with the family for the summer. So I had no expenses.
If you get the right gig, like you basically have no expenses and you make pretty good money. So it's interesting.
And that one we went in a private jet. So
So you would go to other countries, right?
Yeah, I've been to Greece. I've been to Italy. I've gone to the Caribbean with a family from Moscow. Where else?
So give a picture of this, like for example,
more Greek islands.
Greek islands. So you go in the private jet with a family, like 2 kids.
It's not always a private jet, but
for example,
they'll pay the flights to go with them on vacation. So
you're flying in a private jet to Italy
Greece,
or something?
We went to Greece. Yeah.
So how many kids?
Just one.
One kid.
Yeah.
So it's you, 2 parents,
and me.
And the kid,
Yeah.
any other, do they like go with other nannies or, okay, just
No,
you
it was
guys.
just me.
Just you guys, the private jet, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's quite an experience.
and one of the interesting things too is, as I understand, like, the kids are rich, so they also do like cool things. Like you go to like the movies with them or things like that, and go to the VIP theaters.
We went up into the mountains and we went to farms and had private farm tours, and they'd like make these special meals for the family, and I got to be a part of that. And then they'd have like cultural shows for the family, rented a helicopter, rented a yacht, just to go out for like a day or two. So all these really unique experiences that on my own I probably wouldn't have done, because I'm like, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, oh for sure, yeah. And I've even seen some of the listings where it's like they want you to be with them 5 days a week, but they will also like rent an apartment for you for the weekend.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've seen those too. Yeah, it's very interesting. Some of them are very tempting. But on the other hand, what could be the con? What are the cons? Like how could things go wrong?
Things can be very, very demanding.
Yeah. What's like sorry to cut you off. What could be, what is like what do they usually require, like, for hour? Like, for example...
It's different with every family. I've had families where it's just after school and one weekend day.
Okay.
And I've had other families where it's a rota position, a rotation. And so I do 1 week 24/7 and then 1 week completely off.
Okay.
And then
they would have another nanny.
Yeah, and they would have... And in those weeks, like, you are required to live in the house. You're... in that situation, I was helping with laundry. I would wash her laundry sometimes by hand because it's very delicate, like fabrics and things like that, and you have to do it by hand. And then in the morning you have to iron everything and put everything in its place and make sure that you're overly prepared for every outing that you ever go on, because if you're underprepared, you're going to get in big trouble.
Okay.
So those are things that you can learn along the way, and I just learned by being aware of my environment. And when I was with the nanny or with the previous governess or talking to the parents, I just asked as many questions as I could to make sure I understood, like, in this situation, what would I need, or what would you want me to do?
Yeah.
So it's better to be over prepared than under prepared.
Yeah, for sure. So what could be bad about being a nanny? Like how can things go wrong? Like, it's very demanding. That was one thing you said.
It's very demanding.
It can be very demanding.
Yeah. It could be the hours. It could be, sometimes kids go through phases and they can be really nasty kids.
Yeah.
They have a bad attitude, or the family could be going through something, and that can sometimes be difficult because everybody's on edge, or it sometimes creates uncomfortable situations. But if you can continue to do your job and do what you're supposed to do and keep the child safe and teach them English, but also be professional while maintaining a connection with everyone in the family, that's the best way to kind of navigate those situations. Mm-hmm. So
what have been the reason, or some of the reasons, that you moved on from families?
Sometimes the families are crazy.
Okay. Yeah. So that could be a con too.
If I'm being honest, I feel like no matter where you are in the world, when you have somebody new in your life or in your family, like, you can kind of like put on a show, or you can put your best foot forward, but you can only do that for so long.
Yeah, when you spend so much time.
Yeah, when you're
24/7,
or if you see them every single day, life happens, and however you react to life, like, it's gonna happen no matter what.
So we got cut off for a second, but life happens. Yeah,
exactly. That's what we're talking about.
That right here, yeah. It's very interesting. Have you had like it sounds like a lot of your gigs have been like highly demanding. So have you had have you been just a governess and had the kids had other nannies? Have you had that experience?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
I have had that experience. In that case, a lot of times the nannies will kind of step into the background and let me be with the children as much as possible, and they just kind of like stay on the edges of the room or in the next room, and they'll come in if they need to, or if the child needs something.
Okay, interesting.
But in general, they try to let you have your space, because otherwise they're with the nanny that's been with them since, a year, 2 years, or since they were born, and they have an attachment with them. They're like, I want to be with the person I know, not the person I don't know. And I want to speak my language, not a new language that's really hard for me. Yeah. So there's definitely challenges in bringing a child from not speaking a language to speaking a language. Mm-hmm. If you've ever learned a language, we all go through that period where you just get really frustrated and almost angry. Yeah. Just because you don't really want to. Yeah. And if it's something you don't want to do, then you stay angry for a long time. Yes, so that's another thing. You just have to kind of be creative and be able to think on your feet and like, okay, they're not in a good mood. They don't want to do this. How else can I teach them? But in a way that is more fun and entertaining and less like, you have to learn English right now. Yeah. So interesting. You have to be creative. And if they're in a bad mood, you have to try to find ways to like flip their mood and like make them laugh or just be goofy. Sometimes I'll just be angry back at them like, no, we're not friends. And eventually they start laughing and they're like, but we are friends. And I'm like, no, you don't want to be my friend. And they're like, but I do want to be your friend. Doesn't look like it. So yeah, it's an interesting world. I've seen glimpses of and especially here. I mean, you mentioned like sort of compared to Ukraine and here, like there are a lot of very wealthy people here, and so there's a lot of people that are willing to pay good money to have help. And it's I've taught, like for example, I taught English to a girl who had a sister, and each girl had their own nanny, and then they also have a cleaner, like a woman who would clean, and this is in an apartment. Drivers. But they also because I think there were houses being built or something, but. Yeah, you'll have like a private cook, and then you get to eat that food too, right? And then there's, driving nice cars and flying around and stuff. I've had a family with security guards and guns, so.
Wow, yeah.
It's a whole different world that I'm not used to coming from Nebraska.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting, and there are a lot of opportunities around the world. Are there any like websites or agencies that you could recommend, or maybe later you could tell me?
Yeah, definitely. I can give you some links. There are several agencies. I mostly know here in Russia, right, or through Great Britain, or Moscow, and they have mostly postings here in Moscow, but they also have like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, some places.
And a lot of them are Russian families, probably
yes,
too.
Yes, exactly. Occasionally there's some in London looking for tutors or drivers or a housekeeper who speaks Russian or something, but those don't apply to me because I'm not UK, I'm American. Sure. But there's opportunities to kind of go everywhere, and I've met a lot of people who have not only taught here or been governesses here, but they've done it in other countries as well. And I get to talk to them about their experiences here versus the experiences in those other countries like Saudi Arabia, where it's a completely different world. It's a whole different culture. So I think the biggest thing to remember would be like, do your homework. And if you can, talk to somebody who has done it before, because they're going to know more than the internet. And if you don't have a resource like that, then look at the internet, but like be careful what you see, because there are a lot of people out there that would get you to come here and teach and not pay you what you're worth because you don't know what you're worth or because you don't have enough experience, or if you want to come to get experience and you don't want to make money, like there's options for everyone. So
well, if maybe later you can just send me a couple links and I'll put them in the description below the video if anybody's interested. I just it's always interesting to when you can see what opportunities are out there, and especially when people don't realize that that's possible. And then you get into it, and it's a very interesting world, and maybe somebody will watch this video and
it'll change their life.
Then they'll go give it a shot. It's Russia is can be intimidating, but it's not maybe not as scary as people seem to think.
It's not
everywhere you go after traveling to so many countries, like everywhere you go, people are people, and I mean, when you drive, like it can be a little crazy here, but like it's still just like cars in the road, and there's some rules, and I don't know. It's not, most of it is not as hard as it might seem, and once you just kind of get started, it all seems not as crazy as it once did. And
I thought Russia would be the scariest place I'd driven. No.
Yeah, I can definitely say that in some places the driving seems crazier.
I was more scared in Italy than I was in Russia. And in Ireland. They have their own style. It's like different side of the road, and
yes, that takes some getting used to. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I think that's it. Is there anything that you feel like I left out?
No, I think it's pretty.
Cool. Well, I'm happy that
Covered all
we
the
met up
bases.
again. I
Yeah.
think this is only the second time that we've met up. So yeah, and the first time was like 9 years ago or something.
Yeah, it was ages ago.
Yeah.
But social media keeps us connected.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
exactly. Yeah.
And
It feels like it hasn't been. We
I
haven't
know,
been
we
that
still
far
feel
away.
like family and we have a lot in common, so.
Sure. Well, thank you all for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments and any questions or suggestions. Actually, I do plan to make a video about driving in Russia when you mentioned how crazy it is. Because I was driving the other day and I started making a list of things you should know if you want to drive here. But it's kind of fun.
So helpful.
It's can be crazy, but it can be fun.
Yeah. And anywhere you move, reach out to the expat community because they will help you with all the weird things that you are not used to.
Yeah.
Like that has been key for me.
Cool.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for doing this. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.